Today's webinar is the basics of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Infrastructure Network. This is a GIS framework that we've created for bicycling and walking facilities in North Carolina. I am Kristy Jackson, and I'm a research associate here at ITRE. I'm the principal investigator on the project, which is sponsored by NCDOT. ITRE has been developing this geodatabase over the last 2 years, so you or someone in your agency at some point in the last 2 years may have been contacted during this project when we actively asked for data to integrate into this database. Sarah O'Brien is also here with us. She is ITRE's Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Manager, and as our moderator today, she's going to be helping behind the scenes on the webinar here. Just a reminder to those who've just joined us, sign in the pod on the lower right. Any questions that you have up in the pod on the upper right. I am going to check and see if Lauren Blackburn has joined us, and it looks like she has not. Well, Lauren wanted to say a few words of introduction. But we will wait and see if she joins us at some point during the webinar, and we can maybe let her say a few words at the end if she joins us late. But she is and her and the Division of Bicycle and Pedestrian Transportation at NCDOT are the project sponsor. So I guess we'll get started here. Prior to the initiation of this project, there really was no standard terminology or convention for storing bicycle and pedestrian facility information across all of the agencies in North Carolina. There was no central location for data concerning any of these types of facilities. And the division recognized the need to document existing and planned facilities for purposes internal for planning and reporting. And that's where this project was born. The PBIN, the Pedestrian and Bicycle Infrastructure Network, as it is called, is the resulting database, and it uses a common GIS framework for all the facility data within it. So it's an inventory of the typical bicycling and walking assets in North Carolina, and these examples of feature data are to give you a flavor of some of the types of information that are housed in it. The following examples are, sidewalks, shared use paths, which are often known as greenways, bicycle routes, common all over the state, bicycle lanes, paved shoulders. For pedestrians, we have crosswalks, pedestrian signals, various types of the bicycle and pedestrian signage. And to note, we do have both existing and planned assets stored in the PBIN. That's just a flavor of things. So these are the learning outcomes for today's webinar. You should be able to describe GIS assets which are stored in the PBIN, explain what it is, why it's unique in terms of bicycle and pedestrian databases, and therefore potentially its limitations. Describe uses for the PBIN for both stakeholders outside of NCDOT and for internal to NCDOT programs and processes. Also recognize the role that your agency can play in updating the PBIN and keeping it current based on data that you collect and update locally. Also want to understand how to organize your data in the PBIN format so it can be included in the database, and where to get technical assistance if you need it. And finally, to list and locate key resources related to the PBIN. So that's a lot to cover in the next hour or so. So we will get started. Here's a little background, little history on the project. From 2012 to 2014, NCDOT and ITRE worked to establish the initial geodatabase of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We asked a broad range of agencies all over the state for any relevant data that they had on bicycling and walking, and integrated that data into a framework. We reached out to a variety of stakeholders of various jurisdictions. That included all 100 counties in the state, 37 regional planning agencies in the state, all municipalities with populations greater than 5,000 residents. And then we also asked for any available data related. Well, when we reached out, we asked for any data related to biking, walking, or shared use path facilities, such as greenways. Data was acquired from other internal NCDOT initiatives. These included the Planning Grant Initiative, the comprehensive transportation plans from the Transportation Planning Branch, and also regional bicycle plans that had been conducted by NCDOT. So these data sets were compiled, and they were independently created by all those numerous stakeholders that I mentioned, and including some consultants on various projects for example, the Planning Grant Initiative. So we developed a process to combine and store all of the data that was received. We created a consistent terminology and formatting and applied it to all of that data so it could all be put in one place. So the resulting database is a good baseline of existing and planned assets for biking and walking across the state of North Carolina, but a caveat is that it is not comprehensive. We know that there are places for which there were no data available, either because they hadn't been inventoried or the data existed, but we never were able to gather it or collect it. In addition, where protocols for bicycling and walking data exists by the agencies that collected the data, it may be more complete or have more detailed attributes. For example, records from one agency may only contain a line that shows a sidewalk, but other agencies may have more detailed information about that sidewalk, such as a buffer, like a grass strip or a planting zone, or they might have included the width of the sidewalk or the condition of the sidewalk and things like that. So there's a variety of details and level of detail for various facilities based on what was gathered. We have not ground truthed the inventory that we have. So the extent to which the coverage shown represents the coverage of actual biking and walking facilities in the state, we don't really understand that yet. And I just a note that it was very difficult to assign unimproved trails to within the database, because it was often difficult to figure out whether they were for bicyclists, for pedestrians, or for both. So that remains a challenge. So those were some notes on the existing assets, but we also have proposed assets or planning level data in the geodatabase. And this makes the PBIN very unique. In fact, I am not really aware of a lot of other state geodatabases or any that actually house planning level data. And this planning data is very valuable to many processes within NCDOT, especially at the scoping and project development level. But again, planning level data and integrating it into the PBIN came with its own unique set of challenges. Planning level data often lacks specificity. For example, a bicycle facility or a pedestrian improvement may be desired, but due to the nature of the plan, only a broad recommendation is given. Sometimes just a corridor is defined. So those data are often difficult to define within a GIS data set. So you will find that they were given a label that is rather vague. So there's an improvement identified, but we don't necessarily know what it is. It's unspecified. Another example might be from planning level data that there's a greenway that is planned, and depending on the point in the design phase in which the data was created, the exact alignment of, for example, a greenway is not known. So it was in a very early phase, maybe just a corridor, but like the actual alignment that the greenway will take we don't have this very specific information. And also, it was often not possible to match shapefiles received back to their point of origin, and that's often due to the sharing and duplication of facilities and multiple plans and sharing across many, many agencies. So the attribute information to figure out where data came from is often limited. But despite all of those challenges, that planning level data is already being used at NCDOT and is still a valuable resource. So this is a slide, after all those those things about how difficult it was to pull this off, a slide that shows the data coverage of the geodatabase. So this is current as of a couple of days ago or a week ago, showing existing and proposed facilities in the geodatabase. And it's also showing you, it includes both point and line features. So it gives you an idea of what we have. Okay, so at this time, I hope everyone is getting their mouse ready, because you are going to participate in an interactive poll. There will be several polls throughout the webinar, and you'll have a moment to select the best response, and we will show the responses afterward. Bear with me because I haven't done one of these yet, so I'm going to bring up this poll now. Here we go. I'm going to open the poll. Hopefully everyone can see it. I see people are responding to it, so I know you can see it. Okay, good. So the question is, has your agency submitted data to ITRE for the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure project? So the potential responses are yes, you have submitted data on bicycling and walking to ITRE. No, you received the invitation, but you didn't have any data. No, but you want to submit it to us. You don't know that if you did or not. Perhaps you weren't the point of contact that I sent the email to. So we'll wait a moment while the responses are coming in, and we'll see if we reached you or if you guys all would like to submit data. I still see a few responses coming in. Maybe some people switching their answer. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and show the results. It appears that the majority of people do not know if they submitted data, but there were about a third that know that they submitted data, and it is included in our in the PBIN. And there are several that wish to submit GIS data, and we will get to how you can do that a little later on in the webinar. Okay. Moving on. I'm going to go into some greater detail on how the geodatabase is organized. It's broken down into 3 major categories. Each of those categories contain both point and line features. The 6 feature classes are pedestrian facility data, both point and linear, bicycle facility data, both point and linear, and then the shared use path data, both point and linear. The majority of the data in the PBIN currently are assets that are linear, but there are a wide cross-section of point data that are also stored in there. Also, a detailed data catalog accompanies the geodatabase, and it defines all of the features, attributes, and formats for the records stored in the geodatabase. I might say the word data catalog a lot on the webinar today because it really is a great resource that you can use when you're referencing anything within the geodatabase. Okay, the following 3 slides are not intended to be comprehensive, but they are intended to give you an idea of the assets that are stored in the geodatabase. These are examples of bicycle facility data. The linear data shown here include the type of bicycle facility, the signing or marking categories such as like bicycle routes or shared lane markings, wayfinding, the implementation type that might have been used to put the bicycle facility in place, such as a widening of a roadway, restriping, reallocation, which is also often called a road diet, things like that. It also includes other details such as the presence of rumble strips, surface condition, facility name, and I missed facility width there. A lot of detailed information. In terms of point data for bicycle facilities, bike parking, bike corral, maintenance station, bike lockers, bike share stations, bike detection, or bike-specific signalization. We have signage, many signs listed. Some of them are listed here on the slide, and those can be stored within the bicycle facility point data. For pedestrian facility data, here again is just again, not intended to be comprehensive, but a sample. The facility type, either a sidewalk or a footpath. I guess I should note here that any facilities which are intended for use for both bicyclists and pedestrians are stored within shared use path data. So that we'll get to that next, but that often is, you know, where you start making a decision about where something will be stored is by the user. It's bicyclists, pedestrians, or both. So that will be next. But here the material of the sidewalk can be indicated, as well as the type of buffer between the sidewalk and motor vehicle traffic. Notes on implementation, details such as the facility width, the surface condition, or the slope. Again, for point features, there are many detailed elements. They include marked crosswalks, mid-block crosswalks, pedestrian beacons, curb ramps, crossing islands, curb extensions, just to name a few. And the specific signage is able to be indicated, and additionally the presence of hazards or the lack of ADA compliance. In the shared use path data, again, both linear and point data can be stored. A greenway is a type of shared use path and is included with this data. So often people ask, where do greenways go? And they're located in the shared use paths if they're intended for use for both bicyclists and pedestrians. The facility type can be indicated here as a shared use path, a side path, or an unimproved trail, as long as it's intended for multiple types of users. The material list covers multiple surfaces that a shared use path can have. Other details include the surface condition, the width of the path, the width of the buffer. Often these facilities are named, and you can store the name of the facility, and a geographic reference associated with a path. Often that's, for example, the name of a river. Crabtree Creek Greenway would be, the geographic reference would be the Crabtree Creek. Point facilities include amenities associated with shared use paths, and those include parking, benches, things like water fountains. Trailheads and access points can also be indicated. Crossing treatments can be stored in the PBIN that are specific to shared use paths, and you can also include bollards or underpasses or overpasses that are located on a path, and then signage specific to the path. I know that's a lot of detail, but I guess I really wanted everyone to understand how extensive the geodatabase is, and potentially when you submitted data in the beginning, you didn't have an idea of all the things that we could store. So maybe after seeing that list, which is actually abbreviated from the full list, you get an idea of how comprehensive the geodatabase can be as we continue to integrate your data. Here's a slide that shows the extensive metadata. It includes a summary, a description of the PBIN, and its use limitations. Please review the metadata prior to using the PBIN so you understand the limitations and everything that are given here. One of those is that due to the nature of the data and its collection from multiple agencies across the state, NCDOT does not give a warranty to the accuracy, reliability, or completeness of the data. It's a warehouse, and that's its function. All users of the PBIN are encouraged to update their incorrect or missing information and assist with filling out any of the attributes. And with that, we'll take a moment for another poll. So get your mouses, cursors ready, and I will pull that up here. Oops. Okay. Which of the following of these options best describes how your agency obtains GIS data related to bicycling and walking? So I guess think about where your biking and walking data comes from and who collects it. So the choices are that you are an RPO, MPO, or municipality that creates and maintains your own data. You get your data from the RPO or MPO. Your data comes from consultants, or that maybe the only data you have comes from like a PGI plan or something like that. Your data comes from a variety of sources. You do not know where the GIS data that you have for biking and walking comes from, or you do not have any GIS data on bicycling or walking. And I will wait a few minutes while that comes in.
Kristy, while we're waiting, I'll just remind folks that if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to type them in the Q&A pod, which is in the upper right corner of your screen. You see some folks have already posted some questions, and Sarah is working behind the scenes to answer those. So just take the opportunity whenever you have a question to go ahead and type it into the Q&A pod, and folks will respond to it as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thanks, Eugene. I see Lauren has joined us. Lauren, if you're able to test your audio, give us a hello while we're waiting for these votes to come in.
Hello, Kristy.
Oh, good. Glad you could join us. I will have you just say a few words about the project before we finish up at the end. Is that okay?
That's fun.
Okay. All right. So I will close this poll and share the results. It appears that the majority of you have selected that you are an RPO, MPO, or municipality that creates and maintains your own GIS data. That's great. We want it. Send it on over. And that the rest have that their GIS data comes from a variety of sources, and I assume that there's a lot of data sharing going on, and that's fantastic. Hopefully we can start sharing data that's all in the same format and make it easier on everybody. Those of you who don't know where your GIS data comes from, perhaps it can come from the PBIN at some point, maybe a starting point. If you want to start collecting your own data, we're going to talk about that in a minute, and how you can use this format to get started. Okay, I'm going to hide this poll and move on to a very important topic. The uses of the PBIN by NCDOT. So why is NCDOT interested in this data? They have many ways in which they can utilize the information contained in the geodatabase. In fact, we're still really figuring out all of the ways in which we can use it and how we can make the PBIN most useful and have the fields align with the processes that are occurring over at the department. The following is a list of current or future uses of the PBIN, which we've dreamed. We have performance measures. That includes measuring the level of bicycle and pedestrian facility development, as described in the statewide bicycle and pedestrian plan, Walk Bike NC. For example, this could be like the percentage of roads in the state equipped with bike facilities. That could be a performance measure. As for analytical processes, once a more comprehensive and robust database of count data and facility data and crash data is available, we can start to link those things, and there will be greater opportunities to examine the relationships between the facilities and, for example, counts or the presence of crashes. Next, available GIS data can be incorporated into the development of regional bicycle plans. Examples of some of the plans that have been developed to date include High Country, Uni4 Bike Plan, Lake Norman, and the Albemarle Regional Bicycle Plan, and those continue to be developed. The PBIN can be used and is being used in the STIP. It can be used to review all the existing and planned pedestrian and bicycle facilities in proximity to a project that NCDOT is undertaking, forming the basis for recommendations to STIP roadway and bridge projects. And this can inform how incidental bicycle and pedestrian amenities can be included when a project is built. So this, in effect, can assist in leveraging roadway projects and improve conditions for all users. Comments are also provided to the Project Development and Environmental Analysis branch called PDIA. So that's a key use of the data for NCDOT. It can also help assist with collaboration across the Department of Transportation and eliminate redundancy of information, the duplication of data gathering efforts. You only have to, hopefully at some point one-stop shopping for information related to project planning. It creates a standardized format that can be utilized for by NCDOT and other state agency entities. Finally, its potential use in maintenance. The majority of bicycle and pedestrian facilities are locally maintained, but bike lanes and paved shoulders, for example, are commonly requested on DOT roads. So roadway maintenance efforts could potentially be influenced at some point by encouraging maintenance where bike facilities are located. So we can see that as a potential future use. All right, let's talk about the resources we have available. We have the geodatabase, which I've referred to many times, and we are trying to update that on a quarterly basis, but we're going to update that based on the need. Currently, we envision that to be on the quarterly basis. The most current geodatabase is from June of 2015. Actually, it's from yesterday. The data catalog contains information on all the feature classes, all the fields, all the attributes contained within the geodatabase, and it is the number one resource and reference. It has data definitions to assist with understanding everything included in the database. A glossary is in development that is going to describe terminology for active travel. ITRE is working on that currently in conjunction with this project, and it is intended to provide you with visual examples of things contained within the geodatabase and assist with differentiating the things that will not be in the database. It's hoped that the glossary will also assist in standardizing nomenclature across the state for referring to the various terms associated with active travel and the assets, bicycle and pedestrian assets on the ground. So we're very excited to release that within the year. The data template is just a blank database set up in the PBIN data format. You can use it to create a new inventory of facilities or to reformat existing data that hasn't yet been submitted. So that means you don't have to download the whole geodatabase to get just a blank template. And then the last document applies to communities that have received a Planning Grant Initiative award. Those communities, we have outlined what geospatial information is required when they create facility inventories, and optional information that may be included for those who want to have a more detailed inventory. So while those standards are created for communities that have been awarded a planning grant, they are useful to all communities that are developing their bicycle and pedestrian inventories. So that can also be a resource for everyone. You can access all the project information and resources online at Connect NCDOT website. As of about 20 minutes before the webinar, I went to see if we had the most current version of the PBIN and the documents up. We had been scrambling to get the most current version up on the website, and I think that we, as of then, we hadn't yet. It looks like they're there, but when you click the links, they're not yet linked. So we will send out an email after the webinar is completed with an archive of the webinar, so you can access that link, and we'll also make sure that you have a link to the Connect NCDOT website with once everything is live and running. So you can go there right now and you can see where everything would be located, but it's not yet active. But fortunately, it will be extremely current once you are able to download it. So we will follow up. Oh, I should mention, back to this slide, if you're going to the website, the information is found within the bicycle and pedestrian transportation, which is highlighted in red under the projects tab. So if you're trying to find it on your own, otherwise you can just Google Connect NCDOT PBIN. That gets you there. The first hit on Google is that, and then, like I said, it will send the link out as well. But it should be easy to find. So let's talk about adding data to the PBIN. Clearly, we depend on the local governments, MPOs, RPOs, anyone creating bicycle and pedestrian data to build out assets in the geodatabase. A lot of these things aren't built and maintained by NCDOT, so warehousing them is one thing, but creating them is another. So we rely on local governments. So to be considered for incorporation, the data must follow the data catalog. It has to follow the standardized format laid out in the template, and it is highly recommended that communities use the template as a starting point prior to collecting data, and look at the data catalog prior to setting anything up or collecting any data. That data catalog is your primary reference. Fill in as many fields as you can. Many of them will be pretty straightforward, such as if it's from your 2003 pedestrian plan, you can put in 2003, you can put in Carborough pedestrian plan, for example, and away you go. A lot of the things are very straightforward and can be filled in pretty easily. And it's fine to just convert, fill in as many fields as you can before submitting data, but it's fine to just convert data that you have into the format and submit. You don't have to go out and collect all your sidewalk widths before you send this to us. But you can. That would be great. As for transforming data that's already in the database, we've collected a lot, and we've done a lot of this transformation. Hundreds and hundreds of shapefiles that were submitted have already been transformed. But there may be some cases where you want to add additional specificity. You want to put your sidewalk widths in. You want to edit your data. So export those records from the geodatabase based on the category that you're looking to start editing, and use the data catalog as a reference. Fill in as many fields as possible. If you have any questions on what goes in a field, I will talk about technical assistance in a moment, and we can certainly assist with transforming data. Export your records, set up your new fields based on the corresponding format in the data catalog. You can batch transform and ensure that everything matches the PBIN format. It sounds complicated, but it's not that bad. I can do it. Here's a simplified example of data that has been transformed into PBIN format. Well, this isn't in the PBIN format, this is the step before it. But there are 4 records, and they're all bike lanes that are existing facilities in Concord, North Carolina. And they were set up in that format, and the next step here is to append this data into a blank geodatabase. So this is what it might look like when you edit your data before you append it. We've actually added a few more fields since the slide was created that you can likely fill in based on who collected the data, what plan it was in, that kind of thing. Okay, so even if data is existing in the geodatabase for your agency, there's always an opportunity to review and fill out empty fields that were not in your original data set. You may recognize errors, you may want to add new data. So clip or extract the records that need updating and make corrections as you see fit. The data that is extracted should already be in the appropriate format because we put it in the format already, but fill in as many fields as possible prior to giving it back to us. Any new information that you add must follow that standard data format that I just keep referring to. And again, I want to stress that technical assistance is available, and I think that's coming up on one of the next few slides. Here is a quick example of, some fields are really easy to fill in. This is Albemarle, and this is from a plan that they did in 2007. They have existing sidewalk. We know the facility width is 5 feet. And maybe we know the material type on these 29 records that could potentially be easily filled in with some predefined values. That's an example of a place where you might be able to enrich the data set relatively quickly and easily. So there are some data that communities may wish to store in GIS files, which are not a part of the infrastructure network. So these could include crash data, volume data, transit amenities, project cost information, and one that we often saw in planning level data was prioritization information. What level of priority did something have? And none of these are data that are stored in the PBIN. We encourage you to keep this kind of data, but we encourage you to keep it separately from the facility data, or have some sort of some kind of link to link those two data sets together for your use. Now, uploading data. So we've transformed some data, or we've created new data, and we're ready to upload it. You can send it to NCDOT using the contact form located on the NCDOT Connect website. I've drawn a little red box around the contact form, so that's where you go. The next screen will show what that takes you to. The form is linked to this page here. Add comments to the form and upload files that are under 5 megabytes. If the files are over that size, send an email and let Brian know that you have something to submit, and he has a data sharing that we can set up for you. Back to this slide. Make sure to include your name, your phone number, and your email address with your attachment. If there are any issues with submission, a technician can follow up with you and ask questions. Make sure that we get the data that you wished to submit. here's that technical assistance slide I was talking about. It's available to all agencies experiencing issues. Make sure you've used the resources we've given you before you make this initial contact, but we can help you if you're having issues. Brian Poole is the contact over at NCDOT, and here's his contact information. That's also on the NCDOT Connect website. So this is given here. And I want to make a note that although this submission format seems kind of rudimentary and links available for collaborative editing of GIS data, we've investigated some of those processes, but at this phase of the PBIN project, we're really assessing the need and the resources for developing those processes. They're rather expensive and would be time consuming, and we're just really not sure of how much data, how often it gets updated, and how labor intensive this whole process will be. So we're just getting our foot off the ground here, and we'll continue to assess how data is edited and integrated as this project moves forward. A couple of notes or tips that can assist with collecting data or preparing data. A note on accuracy. While there is sometimes a cardinal direction field, the data should be located with enough accuracy as to not require to indicate what side of the road or an intersection the point is on, or the line is on. All data should represent a discrete facility or asset. For example, there might be 2 bike racks located next to each other on NC State campus here, but each bike rack should have its own point in the database. So there are 2 bike racks, 2 points, even if those points are practically on top of each other. Existing versus proposed. A record can be existing, it can be proposed, but it should never be both. Shared lanes is often a big topic. There's a lot of complexity with shared lanes, wide outside lanes, and things like that. And it's used a lot in North Carolina. Also, shared neighborhood streets is another term that we saw. All of these things are classified in the PBIN under shared lanes because no actual bike facility is present specifically for bicycles. It's in there. It's called a shared lane. Shared lane markings then are located under signing and marking. So you can find all of that information and how that is defined and separated within the data catalog. So a couple of examples from the PBIN. I know this is just a simple map of the state's bicycling routes, but it's more than that. You see in the legend that we have listed the bicycling routes across the state routes. But I want to show you also that we not only store the state facility, but we also have room for the county, the local name of the facility, or the county name of the facility, or the national name of the facility. So sometimes it's both, and in this example it's both. It's both the Crabtree Loop, which is a county bike route, and it's also the Mountains to Sea Trail. I don't actually have the little segment highlighted that I'm talking about, but it's more robust. You can grab either a county bike route or a state bike route separately, because the data is stored in that way. So I wanted to point that out as an example. And here's an example that is especially of use to NCDOT internally. It shows a map of all the proposed facilities at a very zoomed out level. So these are all proposed pedestrian improvements shown in red, proposed bicycle improvements shown in orange, and proposed shared use paths shown in blue. So clearly there are a lot of things that we want to build, so that can help with determining need, and it's just another example of something we can do with this database. Understanding your role. Hopefully you have an idea of that already. It's important for the data to be accurate and up to date because it may eventually feed into those planning and prioritization processes at the department. Think about your organization and decide if there are staff resources at your agency that can assist in reviewing the data, updating the data, or creating new data for the database. The most appropriate staff may be at the regional level, but it might also be at the local level. Recognize that the database can assist with your internal agency goals as well, in keeping track of your own assets and sharing assets with other agencies that you do business with in your data products or other planning processes. Having the data in that standard format allows for coordination between everybody, including stakeholders and data users external to those creating the plans and facilities. And those could include potentially researchers, such as myself. So last, this is the final poll in the webinar today, and we're going to allow you to respond to an open-ended question. So if you are at a site where you have multiple people, you can go ahead and discuss this poll. And the question is, how will your agency use the information in the PBIN? What kind of uses do you envision for people within your own departments or within your own agencies, your MPO or your RPO? And take a few minutes to enter your response into the text box and press submit. I've got a note that I may want to broadcast the results before closing the poll. I'm not sure that I did that, but I will do that this time. And we're almost done with the webinar as well, so feel free to type any burning questions into the Q&A pod while we're waiting for some of these to come in as well. Good, I can see lots of uses. Oh, thanks for making that larger, Sarah. I assume it was you or Eugene. It looks like we've got a lot of good responses here. I will go ahead and broadcast the results. So I just breeze through these because I'm also going to talk about this on the next slide, but we've got developing spot projects and updating comprehensive transportation plans, data standardization, great, 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 great. What a lofty goal, right? A valuable reference to coordinate between jurisdictions, better maps. Everybody wants maps. We understand we want maps. I want good data behind those maps. And to develop maps that have, we can do more with. To see where facilities exist near schools, planning expansion projects within small towns in the county as a planning tool. Budgeting for improvements, I think that's a fantastic one. If we know what the need is, we can start to figure out how much it's going to cost, at least at a high level. Developing plans, I think we had that one. Regional planning it is a means to inventory. Perfect. Right from the basic getting your inventory. Not really sure? Well, maybe a start is to download the database and start playing around with it a little bit and seeing how your agency could use it. For regional connections again, comparing plans, raising public awareness. Great. Regional bike route identification. Excellent. Connectivity and impact studies. Well, you guys have pretty much summed up my next slide, I think, by answering that question, but maybe there's a few new things. But what will you use the data for? Here's a whole list of things. So once the data in the geodatabase becomes more accurate, has greater coverage, and has more specific data, uses for it become more and more robust. Some of them were already mentioned. Interagency coordination, is such a big one, and standardization, and we heard funding and a relationship between facilities and schools. Great. But there are clearly lots of uses. Data is really foundational in everything that we do in helping us make informed decisions. And just to mention that the data within this project has already been shared and utilized for several research projects. It's being used at NCDOT, and we can only see the uses of this data continuing to grow. At this time, I would like to let Lauren say a few words before I go to the final slide. Lauren, let's see if we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, I just actually wanted to add a couple things to the fantastic list of applications for the database, and second everything everyone else said, and I think that there's some awesome applications for it. One thing that I've been talking with a lot of other state agencies about, for example, is using this information to promote the existing assets that we have from a walking, biking, tourism standpoint. So what can we do to make maps, like Kristy said? Everybody wants maps, and how can we use this in a digital interface, kind of moving into the 21st century, and how we educate people about what kind of bicycling, walking opportunities currently exist throughout the state. So I think that's one really exciting opportunity for us. And then we, of course, have lots of internal applications. We're already using it for conversations we have with, as Kristy mentioned, PBIN and the roadway design folks, when they're talking about some of the designs of their roadway projects. What information do we glean from PBIN about existing plans so that we can thread that in to whether or not bike and ped accommodations should be considered? So I think there's a strong incentive to submitting bike and ped data to PBIN, because that has become a really important filter for us to knowing whether or not there are local plans for walking and biking infrastructure. It's a good starting point. We don't rely on it completely, but it's become a really important resource for quickly knowing if there's something that we should be looking further into. So I strongly encourage everyone to submit data, and encourage other local governments to submit any kind of GIS information they have. And we know that there will be some technical challenges. For example, some folks may not have easy access to creating this GIS information, so we want to hear more about what those barriers might be, in case we can find other partners to help create the data so it can be incorporated into the big database. So thanks again for joining, and Kristy, I think you've done a great job explaining how we've come to where we are today.
Yes, the long road to here. We're going live. Thanks, Lauren. Really appreciate those few words. Yeah, as Lauren said, the database is a work in progress. The processes for editing the data and sharing the data, those things are currently, and are going to be under development, and we hope to continue to make improvements as the project evolves. We've got about 5 minutes before 2:30. For those of you who may duck out before I finish getting through some of the Q&A, I just want to thank you before you leave. I encourage you to visit the website, which will send out the link to download the data, spend some time reviewing the data we've received, check out your area, and note any missing data or ways that we can improve. So I'm going to turn my questions and try to get to as many of these Q&A things in the Q&A pod as possible, and we'll see where we get. We've got a question, who's going to maintain the database and how often? ITRE is currently maintaining the database. We are working with the division. We are providing technical assistance and continuing to, improve and develop the program. At some point, I can envision that the database will probably transition over to DBPT, but for now we're kind of co-managing it, and we anticipate quarterly updates to it, but like I said, that will depend on the amount of data received. Oh, Sarah's answered some of these already. Thanks for letting me know that. Yes, public repair stations, we have a field for that. Wide outside lanes are tracked under shared lanes. We've got that. Crowdsourcing. I think that is a fantastic way, but I think that would have to be done locally. If your agency wants to use some sort of method to gather data and fill in gaps, we'll accept data that your agency gathers, especially for existing facilities. But that would have to be undertaken locally at this time. Complete street category. That's a good question. There is not a complete street category at this time. I guess that would have to be really well defined in order to understand what that means for each type of facility. I just don't actually see that being trackable, but what we can track are all the things that make up a complete street, or start to track those things, such as presence of sidewalk and bike facilities and things like that. Are bicycle routes on the center line or separate for each side of the road? Bicycle routes are center line, but bike lanes, sidewalks, and any other feature that may be side of the road specific are tracked separately. Yes, so bike routes are center line, but bike lanes, for example, are discrete on each side of the road. I can't actually make my Q&A pod bigger, so I'm having a hard time seeing which ones that have been responded to or not. Ah, thanks. How do organizations verify the accuracy of the data? So it's we've taken all of your data and we've looked at what you've given us, and we can only assume that the data that you've given us is accurate, and we've transformed it into the format using the best knowledge that we have on the original intention of what it is that the entity wanted the facility to represent. In some cases, we had to go back and ask questions of that agency about what they meant by certain nomenclature, for example. So we've done our best to accurately input the data, but that doesn't mean that it is entirely accurate just because of the nature of how we've collected and integrated it. So we encourage you to go back and look at what you've given us in this new format and make corrections as you see fit.
Hey, Kristy, this is Lauren.
Yeah.
On the next question about NCGIA.
Yes.
I have, I think you may know this, I've done a couple presentations to, I think it was the Western meeting of the GIS work group, and then we've made some inroads with helping educate the NCGIA folks in general about PBIN, but definitely looking for other opportunities to continue sharing it and seeing if there's other ways to collect data and update it and so forth. Yep.
I mean, we know of a lot of GIS data that exists out there that we just don't have in the database yet. I mean, I can look at it and I know that there is data for it, but it's just that it hasn't been submitted yet. So I can see, as we continue to reach out to not just the NCGIA and other stakeholders, we'll continue to, as people share and see the relevancy of this data and see that their data is not in there, we'll continue to build it out. Kenneth says, can anybody access the database? It is open for everybody, including, it's going to be public. It's on the NCDOT Connect website, and anyone can download it. And feel free to reach out using the contact form on the website. And again, like I said, we will be sending out that email with a recording to the webinar and a link to all of the resources that we've mentioned today. We'll, at this time, it's after 2:30, and we're going to conclude the webinar. So let us know if you have any questions, and thank you for attending.